Hey, what's up everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we're doing the what's next on the Unified Super Welterweight Champion of the world at 154 pounds, Jermell Charlo, following his second career defeat when he moved up 2 weight classes to 168 Super Middleweight to challenge Canelo Alvarez for the Undisputed Super Middleweight Championship and lost a one-sided 12-round unanimous decision in that fight. That was on September 30th on Showtime pay-per-view. Now, before we get into that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel up here. So back to that, that loss for Charlo. A lot of people are criticizing him that he just showed up for a paycheck. I don't think it was that at all. I do like Charlo. I did pick Canelo to win in a dominant fashion. I thought he was going to stop Charlo. He did get put down. He did put Charlo down in the 7th. But Charlo showed heart. He stayed in there. One thing, the reason why I don't believe that, one of the reasons why I don't believe that Charlo just showed up for a paycheck is Charlo defensively was very sound in terms of Canelo landing flush, clean shots. I'm watching the fight with my boy Duran the Man, and we were noticing that Charlo was adjusting his head just slightly when Canelo's punches were coming in to where the punches weren't landing to where it was really landing super flush, or he was turning his shoulder, or he was getting his elbows down on the body shots. And I think that really played well for Charlo. Also, I really think it had everything to do with just the overall power difference between 154 and 168. Charlo wasn't ready for that. I don't think he was ready for that. It's tough to get acclimated to that kind of punching power. And I just don't think Charlo was ready for Canelo and what Canelo was bringing, which is partly why Canelo's such a great fighter. But Charlo's a really good fighter too, and he took a chance. He came up. He landed some clean shots, but he could not hurt Canelo, and that's the thing, is everybody was saying, oh, Charlo's got the power, Charlo's got power, Charlo's got... Well, it wasn't enough for Canelo. Canelo's never been really hurt outside of very early in his career. So, Canelo's a beast. Canelo can take shots, and, he came right at Charlo, and he fought well. And, Charlo, nothing to hang his head about. But now the big question is, what's next for Jermell Charlo following that loss? Well, Charlo already said he's moving back down to 154. So he still has 3 belts. He had the 4th belt was stripped, the WBO title, the night of the fight after he was announced as undisputed champion. The WBO stripped him and upgraded Tim Tszyu, the interim champion, to full champ because Charlo had failed to meet his mandatory requirement against Tszyu for the better part of a year, as injuries kept Charlo out of that fight. Now, what we know is that the IBF has ordered Charlo to fight their Russian fighter, Bakhtimir or something. He's the mandatory challenger in IBF. They've ordered him to defend that title next. So Charlo might, I don't know how frequent he plans on fighting or when he plans on coming back. I hope he fights more frequent than he did, especially if he wants to hold on to these 3 belts and then face, somebody like Crawford or Tszyu. But I really think Crawford's focused on Tim Tszyu, and Tim Tszyu potentially, or Crawford, if Crawford moves up. So I believe that I don't think he's going to make this mandatory defense. I think he's going to give up the IBF belt too in search of just the bigger fights, because he's already accomplished the undisputed title. So I don't think he's really going to care about the IBF belt, and I don't think he's going to follow through with that mandatory defense. So now let's take a look at the rest of the top 10, and then we'll close it out with the potential showdown with Bud Crawford at the end. So, or we could just start with that. Let's start with the potential showdown with Terrence Bud Crawford. Could that happen next? It really is dependent on a couple things. One, is Crawford gonna fight Spence next? We don't know. We know Spence has the rematch clause. We know he activated it, but now they have to agree on the weight, because the original weight clause was that the winner would be able to dictate the weight for the second fight. But and Crawford has come out and said that he never refused the fight to take place at 154. He said that Spence hasn't formally requested that. So Crawford automatically assumed if he hasn't formally requested that, then the rematch would take place at 147 for the Undisputed title again. Now, how does that impact Charlo? Well, a potential Charlo fight. Well, Crawford, if the fight with Spence doesn't happen, Crawford might want to fight Charlo. But Crawford, after the fight with Canelo, said that Charlo didn't even try and that he's no longer on his radar. I don't agree with that, but who knows, So, right now I'm leaning towards this fight is not going to happen next for Charlo unless he's taking another long layoff and he's going to wait for Crawford to potentially beat Spence in their rematch. That's the only way I see this fight potentially taking place next for Charlo. But it could happen. He could take a long layoff because, let's be honest, this rematch between these two, between Spence and Crawford, could happen January, February area. And then if Crawford wins in decisive fashion again and doesn't get hurt, he might be willing to come back during the summer, and fight Charlo. And Charlo, he's used to taking long layoffs. He might just wait around for that. I hope he doesn't, but he might. So we'll see. Now let's run through the guys at 154. We start with Tim Tszyu, the former champ, or the current WBO champion. Would Charlo want to fight Tszyu? Well, if Tszyu beats Brian Mendoza, Tszyu is essentially number 2 to Charlo's number 1 at 154. No doubt. So I think Charlo, he's already expressed interest in fighting Tszyu. He would add a 3rd belt to his resume again, and he would just need to add the 4th belt, if he is planning on keeping that belt. Tszyu's fighting Mendoza literally in 2 days, and it's an easy fight to make, and these guys could return around the same time in about 4, 5, 6 months area. So, I really believe that Charlo and Tszyu is possible next, especially because I do believe Spence and Crawford are going to fight next. So it's not like Charlo's gonna have to go. It's not like he's gonna be able to go straight into a Bud fight if that was potentially there. And I think if Bud really has soured on a fight with Charlo, I think Charlo needs to prove himself again by defeating somebody of Tim Tszyu's quality to prove that he's legitimately still at the top of 154. And then I think Charlo might fight him in the second half of the year. So we'll see. We'll see what goes down there. But I do believe Tim Tszyu is very possible. Brian Castano, a 3rd fight. I just don't see... Castano hasn't done anything since the rematch. Since Charlo stopped him. Castano hasn't fought. So what would the benefit be of a 3rd fight right now? I'd love to see a 3rd fight. I think Castano would definitely be into it, but I just don't think it does anything for Charlo to go out there and beat Castano again, since Castano really hasn't done anything since their fight when Charlo knocked him out. Brian Mendoza. Well, it depends on if Brian Mendoza were to beat Tim Tszyu, then I think absolutely Charlo's fighting Mendoza next, because Mendoza will have beaten Fundora and Tim Tszyu, the top 2 guys in the division, outside of Charlo, and Mendoza will grab the WBO belt, and he's still the interim champion of the WBC. So Charlo would kind of be in a mandatory defense mode because he's the WBC champion, and I think he'd want the fight anyway. So I think if Mendoza pulls off the upset, and I think he is a live underdog against Tszyu, I think Charlo and Mendoza could very likely happen. But I am picking Tszyu to win that fight. Sebastian Fundora, he's not on the radar. Charlo was avoiding him to an extent already, and now that he's been knocked out against Mendoza, there's no reason for Charlo to take that risk. So no, that one's not possible. Erickson Lubin, a rematch? No, Lubin, you know, he knocked Lubin out years ago, and you know, he's knocked him out years ago, and in 2017. Lubin hasn't done anything, especially since losing to Fundora last year, to really earn and demand a rematch with Charlo. So Charlo has nothing to gain out of that. Magomed Kurbanov, he's number 2 in the WBA. Unless the WBA were to order that fight, you know, if Charlo foregoes the IBF, you know, mandatory, unless they were to order that, I don't think there's any chance. But, you know, Kurbanov is number 2. So I really don't think they're going to order it. Michel Soro, another one. He lost to Kurbanov, so Charlo would not be interested in that. Not a big enough name. Tony Harrison, a third fight. There's no reason for that. Tim Tszyu dominated Tony Harrison, so there's no reason for a third fight. And then Danny Garcia. You know, to be honest, since Danny Garcia and Erislandy Lara have not happened, if Charlo just wanted to come back and fight a name fighter next, I think Danny Garcia could be the guy that he fights. I mean, I really do think that's a possibility, especially if Garcia is willing to take on Erislandy Lara at technically middleweight at 155. Why not fight Charlo for his titles at 154 instead? So I do think the possibility's there. So overall, what do I think he's going to do next? I think Tim Tszyu is. I think it's going to be Charlo and Tim Tszyu next. Personally, that's my overall feeling. I do believe that there's possibilities of Brian Mendoza if he pulls off the upset over Tim Tszyu. And then I can also see potential showdowns with Bud Crawford if the fight with Spence doesn't happen, or Danny Garcia if Danny Garcia doesn't decide to fight Erislandy Lara at their 155 middleweight title catch weight proposed fight that's supposed to happen. So that's what I think what's going on for Charlo. That's it. That's what I got. That's the what's next on the Unified Super Welterweight Champion of the World, Jermell Charlo, following his one-sided 12-round unanimous decision loss to Canelo Alvarez, as Charlo moved up and challenged for the Undisputed Super Middleweight Title at 168 pounds. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.